What was the worst thing your boss ever said to you? It was 6 months after my son was born, and I'd just put in new workstations and designed software for my team. Everything was running pretty smoothly, but my son had a health crisis and I was back to getting 4 hours of sleep each night. My boss started to want me to come in an hour early than the team to resolve any problems before they started their AM coffee. When I protested, as I was already working 10-plus-hour days, he took me aside and told me he'd talked to the director and they were thinking about replacing me because of my poor performance. It was all lies. The director was ecstatic with my work. That sounds tough. Balancing work and personal life is always a challenge, especially with a newborn. I can relate to the feeling of being undervalued at work while putting in so much effort. It's frustrating when someone tries to undermine you like that. It's good to hear that the director saw your true performance. Just pushes home the importance of having supportive people around. While getting my PhD in astrophysics, I had a totally brand new idea for a research paper. I built a framework for it, wrote some code, and showed some preliminary analysis to my PhD advisor. In his typical fashion, he didn't like the idea because it wasn't his. He called my idea high school geometry that anyone could do, and a waste of time. I went ahead and wrote the paper anyway and submitted it as a solo author. It got published and was pretty well received by the community and ended up being an important stepping stone for some of my future work. A few years after I graduated, JWST directly observed my idea, and a bunch of other people jumped onto my research. My PhD advisor called me up and admitted he was wrong, which was extremely rare for him, haha. That's a solid story about taking initiative. It's interesting how sometimes you believe in your ideas even when others don't. Your PhD advisor's reaction is typical in academia, shutting down new thoughts. The fact that your work was later validated by JWST makes it even better. It's always rewarding when your hard work pays off and gets recognized, especially when it shifts the perspective of your critics. Boss left a signed contract to give to the landlord. I noticed the prices were completely out of whack with the market, so I did some investigating and got some new estimates. Talked to the landlord and he provided a new contract with significantly lower prices, saving my boss literally tens of thousands of dollars. Boss said, "You must have too much time on your hands." I asked for a small raise, the savings would cover my raise 10 times over. He refused the raise, so I found a job that paid me significantly more. When I gave him my resignation letter, he said he'd give me the raise. I chuckled and said he could no longer afford me. That's an interesting situation. You went out of your way to help your boss save some serious cash, but in the end, it felt like your efforts weren't appreciated. Asking for a raise after that kind of work seems fair, but it's good you found a better opportunity that valued you more. The response you got when you resigned was a classic move by a boss trying to keep a good employee. Why didn't you stop him? When a 6 feet 3 inches beefy truck driver shoplifted 5 CDs by shoving them down his pants and running full speed out of our front door. I'm a 5's petite woman and I sure as hell did not get paid to act as security, let alone risk my life over 5 CDs. Not to mention corporate had a non-confrontation policy when it came to loss prevention. That boss was an idiot. It's wild how people react in the moment. I remember working at a store when a guy tried to take a whole cart of stuff. My instinct was just to watch and hope he'd leave without causing a scene. There's no paycheck that's worth the risk, especially when management isn't backing you up. Makes you think about priorities, I guess. Just another day in retail, really. You've maxed out on how much you can make here. Background info: I was the second lowest paid technician, yet I got to fix everything no one else could figure out. I walked out without 2-week notice soon after. It's interesting how that works. You can be the go-to person for tough problems but still get paid like you're starting out. I guess it just pushed you to find something better. Sometimes walking away can be the best choice, even if it's not how you planned it. It's all about knowing your worth and not settling. No words were exchanged, but a department head in our store had a heart attack, and when someone went up to his office to tell him, he rolled his eyes and closed the door. He wasn't the one to call 911, and he didn't step out of his office for a while and basically acted like it never happened. That's kind of wild. You'd think someone would take that seriously. Makes you wonder about the culture in the workplace when people react like that. It's like he decided that ignoring it was easier than dealing with it. Just shows how some people really don't want to be involved, even when it's serious. Can't say I'd do the same though. The day before I left for vacation, my manager called me into the president's office. The president then called me a pain in his ass among other things and proceeded to list a bunch of things wrong with me. It was the first time I had heard any of those criticisms. Some were valid and some not. They hinted I needed to shape up or else. At that time, it was very early in my career, so I really believed them when they said I was the problem. Looking back, I realize how much poor management was going on there. Part of me wishes that I had quit on the spot for the president's language alone. That sounds like a rough experience. It's tough to hear criticism, especially when it feels unwarranted. It's also interesting how we change our perspective over time. You probably learned a lot from that, even if it didn't feel like it then. It's a reminder of how important good management is. Walking away might have been a bold move, but it also could have opened doors later on. I worked for Cracker Barrel a long time ago. One day, a manager asked me if could come in overnight to blanch bacon. I'd never done it before, so he just told me what to do, but not actually show me what to do. You basically just cook the bacon halfway. I came in and did the best I could from what he told me. Next day, or whenever I was next scheduled, I came in and right when I saw that manager he said you single-handedly ruined all the bacon. That was just a bummer to hear. I was just hung my head, said damn, sorry, and walked away. Crazy part was after I had walked around the line. The guy who was working the grill that day saw me and said I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. I opened this morning and everything was fine. I would eat this. There's nothing wrong with any of this bacon. Sounds like a rough moment. You show up trying to do your job, and then the manager hits you with that. It's tough to take the blame when you were just following instructions. But the grill guy had your back, which is cool. It's good to know not everyone thought you messed up. Sometimes it's just one person's opinion that makes things feel worse than they are. Boss was obsessed with being thin. I am not thin. He would constantly tell me to chew and spit my food, starve myself, etc. One year, he gave everyone iPads for Christmas. Everyone except me. As he was handing them out, he said to me, I was going to get you one too, but I thought it would be a better investment if I paid for half of the treadmill of your choice. Everyone's jaws dropped, they all looked at me. I kind of laughed it off. Still cringe when I think about that. I had a similar experience back in college. A friend kept pushing me to lose weight, constantly giving me unsolicited advice. One day, at a party, he brought a scale and insisted I weigh myself in front of everyone. It was awkward. I laughed it off too, but it felt really uncomfortable. People can be insensitive without even realizing it. Sometimes, it's better to just keep those thoughts to yourself. I was 18, my childhood dog, my best friend, passed away at almost 12 years old. That week, I took more than 15 minutes on a break cause I got emotional. Boss asked me what's wrong and I told him, said I was sorry, I didn't realize I'd taken a 17-minute break instead of 15, and he told me it's just a damn dog, who cares, and he laughed in my face. I still regret not throwing hands. That sounds really tough. Losing a pet hits hard, and it's rough when people don't understand the bond. Your boss probably didn't get it, but that doesn't make it any easier for you. It's frustrating when you feel like your feelings aren't taken seriously. Sometimes, you just want to vent, and a response like that can make you wish you'd reacted differently. It's just a lot to handle when you're grieving. She saw my old self-injury scars and informed me that I was going to burn in hell. I was like 17. She then wrote me up for insubordination when I didn't do a task exactly as she wanted. I had no idea she wanted it that way, and it had never been an issue. I escalated to the general manager and told her about the burn in hell thing. The general manager must have smelled the danger and told the other manager off before I escalated further. That's a rough experience. It's wild how adults can sometimes act without thinking about how their words affect younger people. The way you handled it by going to the general manager shows a lot of maturity. Not everyone would have stood up for themselves like that. Glad it worked out for you in the end. It's important to speak up about these things. Haven't you ever been a manager before? Said to me by the toxic manager who hired me 2 months prior to build and lead their team. Said manager had less than 1 year leadership experience and knew I had 20. Needless to say, it didn't last. The toxic manager thought they could do a better job and didn't need me. The team there still wishes I would come back and have been quitting one by one since I left. LOL. Sounds like a tough situation. It's wild how some people don't recognize others' experience. The toxic manager clearly overestimated themselves. It's a shame the team is struggling now. It's often the case where poor leadership drives talented people away. At least you made an impact while you were there. It seems like they realized who actually had the skills once you left. The regional vice president stopped by our branch, wanted to have a chummy little chat with everyone. When I requested more training so that we could all achieve the kind of numbers another branch were achieving, she gave me the middle finger. I quit 6 weeks later for a much better job and career. She's still a regional vice president, never moved up. That's one way to handle things. You asked for growth, and it wasn't well received. Seeing you move on to a better opportunity while she stayed in the same spot says a lot. Sometimes, you just have to find what works for you. Getting out of a dead-end situation feels good. It's a reminder that standing up for yourself can lead to something better. Worked at a famous donut shop chain, the managers would have a call-off list where they would record call-offs and the details of the call-off. They started posting it to the office where everyone would count their registers, so it would show things like food poisoning. Flu made me really uneasy. I never really called off, but I still brought up that it was wrong, and because it was posted in the office, they said they weren't breaking any rules. One day, they crossed the line and wrote period cramps, where everyone could see, and I told my male manager how disgusting and disrespectful that was. He told me no offense, but you need to mind your business. I was so livid, and I said as a woman that is my business. He was the regional manager's nephew by the way, so he was like okay, I will bring it up to the general manager and see what she has to say. I got an apology next day and they took that list down real quick. I think they realized they f'd up and didn't want it get escalated. Sounds like a rough situation at that donut shop. It's pretty wild how some people just don't get it. Posting personal reasons for calling off can cross a line, especially when it involves sensitive topics. Glad you stood up for yourself. It's good they took it down after realizing their mistake. Sometimes it takes a voice to make things change. While trying to work through a difficult task, I said maybe we could try. He interrupted me and shouted there is no we. It's my way or no way at all. Just do it. I left for lunch and never came back. The permanent sign out front that said "Now hiring" should have been the first red flag. That's a tough experience. It's frustrating when someone won't work together, especially at a job. It makes you think about the work environment and whether it's worth it. Noticing that "Now hiring" sign later makes sense. Sometimes, the signs are there, but you ignore them until it's too late. Taking a break was probably a good call. Better to walk away than deal with that attitude daily. You're just a grunt, I outrank you, and you don't need to think. What made it worse is that he was my best friend whom I'd known since junior high. I lived with him, and other roommates, we all worked in the same place. The stuff he would say and do outside of work was way worse. He'd push buttons until I delivered an emotional response. He knew every bit of my trauma and used his own to write his behavior off as no big deal. In retrospect, it's pretty clear that I was in a fucked up relationship with a narcissistic closet case. I'm so glad I decided to stop talking to him. That sounds tough. It's rough when a close friend turns out to be toxic. It can mess with your head, especially when they know your history and still hit those buttons. Recognizing that you needed to step away is important for your own well-being. Sometimes, cutting ties is the best choice. It's good you've moved on from that situation. This was in the early 80s, before sexual harassment training and awareness was commonplace. I was probably 19, working in an accounting department. My boss said to me, "If you were my wife, I'd keep you barefoot in the winter and pregnant in the summer." Funny thing is, I did not take offense to it because that's how women were treated at the time. That's an interesting reflection on how social norms have changed over the years. Back then, comments like that were sadly more accepted. It's a good reminder of how much things have evolved in terms of workplace culture and respect. What seems outrageous now was just part of the environment back then. It's important to recognize those shifts and keep pushing for better standards. Are you only asking for a promotion because your girlfriend recently got a promotion? I walked out on the yearly evaluation and had a new job within 2 months. They even offered me a promotion and to match the new salary, light skin tone waving hand sign. It's funny how sometimes a situation can push you to take actions you wouldn't have otherwise. I remember my friend feeling undervalued at work. After a similar comment from their boss, they decided to look for something better. A few weeks later, they landed a job with a much better role and pay. Sometimes, dissatisfaction can be the best motivator. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.